Welcome to the Grow Your Law Firm podcast, brought to you by 𝑑𝑶𝑫𝑫𝑬. This podcast helps lead lawyers to more growth, profit, and freedom. Here is your legal marketing expert and host, Ken Hardison.
Well, hello, everyone. This is Ken Hardison. Welcome to another episode of Grow Your Law Firm. And today we have the honor of having Luke Russell, founder of Russell Media and co-founder of SEO Police. And I've known Russell now for probably close to 10 years.
Yeah.
And he really is a good person and very knowledgeable in the area of online marketing, especially social media. So welcome today, Luke. Glad to have you here, my friend.
Thank you, Ken. It's an honor to be here.
Okay. So, I remember meeting you, I don't know how long ago it was I got you to come speak at one of my masterminds. It's probably close to 10 years ago. I don't even remember exactly.
It was July 2011.
Okay. So it's been 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Exactly. How about that? So, and I was impressed then, I'm impressed now. So for the people out there that don't know you, can you kind of tell us your story, how you got to where you are now?
Yeah. So I remember I started Russell Media, which back in 2009, I was trying to figure out, I had a mentor, what can you sell, Luke? And it was basically websites. And I got in, started selling simple websites but the problem is if you're selling simple websites, you can't make much money on that. And transitioned over, met a coach through GKIC, Scott Manning. And he got me into the world of Facebook, and I started doing lots of stuff with that. And that's how I met you, Ken, was he had connected us. And I remember coming out to your mastermind. At that time, I didn't actually know what a personal injury lawyer was, other than probably an ambulance chaser. That was probably about the extent of my knowledge, was the stereotype. And, but yeah, so I met you, and I met, some other lawyers, and then I ended up getting hired as director of marketing for a law firm for several years, and that really is where I learned a lot at Jacobino Lake. I learned a lot about mass torts, learned a lot about personal injury. My job was largely to teach and market to lawyers about making mass tort investments, and so I was teaching the business and litigation side of mass torts to lawyers, as this started as a 22-year-old not knowing much of anything about the legal space. And yeah, so that really, then eventually I stopped, wanted to be off on my own and started taking on different clients, and have done a whole lot of Facebook advertising over the years. That's been done more on Facebook, Instagram, their ecosystem than anything else. And we've done PI, we've done things like workers' comp, social, different types of disability. We've done a lot of mass tort work. We kind of the Facebook's built better, I think, for mass torts, but then I think there are ways we continue. I feel like I'm a broken record where we are okay, we're getting out of PI, but then we get back into PI, and then we get out of PI, then we get back in, and I feel like that's a cycle, partly just because we keep having clients have different kinds of successes, but yeah, so we've been around in this space for quite a while at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. And a disclaimer, we co-founded SEO Police together. I was so impressed with you, and I saw what I thought was a need, and I talked to you about it when we started this company a couple of years ago. Can you tell our listeners about it?
Yeah, so the SEO Police is I'm obviously a little biased, but it's this really cool service where basically, I looked out and was just seeing this lawyers asking me, because I don't want to sell SEO. I don't want to sell SEO as a service, but I had people saying, hey, could you help me with understanding what this vendor is doing? Or could you help me? I don't know the questions to ask, or I don't know how to I know things aren't what I want, but they're nice, and are they doing the right things? And so we started just kind of playing with that. And I talked to you, and you liked the idea, and let's do something together. And it's really where we're helping give power to lawyers with managing their SEO. And so we are really like your director of SEO per se, where we come in and we do a monthly review of what's been happening with SEO, look at the rankings and see what's going on, and talk to the vendor. And sometimes like people think like, oh, I'm already paying my SEO vendor, why should I pay for another thing? And it's the same reason you would have an employee spending their time working with a vendor, except in this case, you have somebody who understands the nitty gritty details of SEO. We got all the different software we need to assess things. And then it's like looking, it's not about saying your vendor's not even doing a good job. It's like saying, okay, we're in a highly competitive, like legal SEO is really competitive. And so it's about having somebody on the outside look and listen to what the law firm needs. And you understand the law firm's goals and their market. And you look over here and you go, okay, here's what the SEO company is doing. Here's what's going on in the SEO world in, say, Dallas. And so it's about looking out and saying for, SEO there's a fair amount of carryover from different markets, but there's also needing to uniquely shift for this client or that client. And so it's really about giving you somebody who's on your side, who understands all the details, and it's about sharpening the focus. I mean, sometimes you have vendors who end up, maybe needing to let go, but most of the time your vendor, it's really just about not being fully aligned with the law firm's needs, we've had some scenarios. I love this. We had one guy hire us back in May, and he called up his vendor because he told us, he's like, I've been with them for a year. We've been struggling. This is a person who spent a lot of money on SEO. And he said he called up the owner of the SEO company and just said, hey, just want you to know, I called the SEO police and having them do an audit. And so between the time when we started the audit, we saw like, wow, they're ranking mostly like bottom of page 2 at best, if not page 3. And then, because these audits take a little bit of time to complete, about 10 days later, we were wrapping up the audit. And Jeff, he's our IT guy, he runs the reports again. And he goes, wait a second, your rankings just went up. Now you're at the top of second page. And that's this person was in a really competitive market and was like, hold on a second. So we asked the client, hey, did you say something? The client was like, yep, I called them up, told them that I had hired you all. And then all of a sudden, magically, I mean, very, very, is a little extreme of an improvement to see, but he saw already a substantial bump, and being at the top of page 2 in a highly competitive market is not bad. I mean, it's not ideal, but it's a lot better than being at the bottom of page 2. Nobody's looking at that. And so like sometimes you do have a vendor who needs just a little bit of like somebody's watching just to, and you might have the right team. They just, they need a little bit of like understanding that like, you're going to have higher expectations, and there's somebody who understands all these technical details, and you can't, like when you start talking in the jargon, we understand all of that. So now it's no longer like, it's like, wait a second, we don't care about that, but we do care about this. Anyways, like, it's just a really cool service. It's really more like a monthly review with a vendor call. And our clients, I mean, we see improvements without having to go fire vendors and hire a new one.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head. Here's what I saw when we started this company was lawyers, their expertise, their strengths are in practice and law. They don't know the right questions to ask. They're paying, some of them paying anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000 a month, and they don't even know if they're getting what they've been promised. They have no way. I mean, they can look and see if they're on the, but you can. Just like numbers, you can make it say whatever you want to. Like I can just show you all the keywords that I got you ranking good on, but if those keywords are no good, then why do I mean, yeah, you can think I'm doing a great job, but really the ones I really need, you got me on page 2 or 3, and I'm not getting the trade. You know what I'm saying? Why am I not, I'm ranking. Why am I not getting the calls or the inquiries? And so I think that's the big deal is, you don't know what you don't know, and I think it's just like you said, and I think that the name of the company is spot on, SEO Police, because really we're just policing. It doesn't mean that we're, like you said, going to kick somebody out, but I think, as my mom always told me, the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? And if they know the eyes are watching, people just tend to do better, either consciously or subconsciously. I'm not going to say either way. But but I think you're right, and I think it's a good service, and I appreciate you jumping on board and helping me with this, because I don't have the expertise, all the technical expertise to ask the right questions. I probably know more than most lawyers,
Sure.
but there's still a lot of weeds to get into that I would not know. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk to you today about a couple of things.
Mm-hmm.
One, I want to talk to you about this new, this new iOS change with Apple and Google. I mean, there was a lot of flurry about it, several months ago. Now the dust has kind of settled, and I think we got a better picture of what's going on. Somebody like you probably do. So I want to pick your brain on that. And then I want to talk to you about a new podcast you got out that I
Mm-hmm.
had the pleasure of being on. And we'll talk about that and then wrap it up. So,
Awesome.
so tell us about the deal that Apple and just give us a background of this whole change and what it means for lawyers and their advertising, and then I'm gonna kind of let you free flow with it. I mean, I might
Yeah.
jump in and interrupt, but otherwise, I'm gonna let you. I want you to educate our listeners and viewers on what this is all about and how to get, if there is a way to get around it, or does it really even matter?
Yeah. So the first like place to start, I mean, this has been Facebook and Apple have been kind of feuding. I mean, Facebook had like a full page ad they took out against Apple at one point, and like there's been just a general social in our country, and I mean outside our country too, but like within the US, we've had a lot of conversation about data privacy, and we're in an age where there's more and more data being collected on us everywhere. And so there's been a lot of push to say like, hey, like, yes, there are benefits to the data as companies are able to serve better ads so that they're more relevant to you versus sending me ads for something I'm never going to want. Like that's a good thing generally from a user experience. Maybe not everybody cares about that, but generally like having ads tailored to things that actually are relevant to you is generally better than irrelevant. But what happens is that we start seeing how much data these companies have. And so Apple, they've been one of those companies that like just is like, we're going to declare what the market has to be and force other people to follow suit. And they've done that with giving individuals the option to choose to let a website or an app on the phone choose to track you. And so we use this tracking. I mean, it's just a basic Facebook pixel. If anybody's heard of that, it's just some code that you would have from your Facebook ad account. You could stick it on your website, your landing pages, and then you could target those people, retarget them. So if somebody comes in as viewing your contact page, you could follow them up with ads about contact us. So you could, if people went to pages about motorcycle accidents, you could follow up with ads about motorcycle accidents. Now, and people didn't have really the choices were using some browsers that really restricted that, or having certain, you could get like an add-on to Chrome to kind of disable some of the tracking. And yet, like, so you kind of had to be more of a savvy user per se, or just go out of your way from using what was standard. So whether you were using Internet Explorer, Edge, Chrome, like, there wasn't anything inherently stopping people from tracking you. So everybody was just being tracked. And so that means, like, from like thinking about from a Facebook advertising standpoint, you had all kinds of targeting options because people were going across the internet, being tracked everywhere they go, and Facebook was collecting all of this information. They already have a lot of information. So like if you post on Facebook, Facebook's tracking that, but that's also within their ecosystem. So if anybody's surprised by that, yeah, I mean, that's just, you're using an app. They should be allowed to use that data to then serve you an ad. I mean, like, that's my opinion. But Facebook was getting all this data. Nobody knew, like, a lot of people weren't just stopping to realize, like, oh man, when I go over to this website, I'm being tracked. When I go over here, I'm being tracked. And this gave advertisers access, not directly, but through to a platform, Facebook, that knew the users unbelievably well. And so it could help me if I were, targeting somebody who had been to personal injury websites, or people who had been to different, who were interested in various cancers for like our mass toward advertising. And those targeting options are still there. They're not gone. However, Facebook now has to get that data in different ways. And so because what happened was is um, Apple had announced that with iOS 14.5 that they would be giving users the option to choose. And the vast majority of users decline tracking. And so what this means is now it's still like on Android and a lot of different devices, you're still being automatically tracked with if somebody has that Facebook pixel installed on their website. And so there's still a lot of data that's still there. However, there's some of it's being taken away. And Android, or I mean, Google's, I believe, taking that away from Chrome. They've announced kind of they're making some shifts in the coming months. And so generally, it's, I would really expect as an advertiser that we're going to kind of have a decline in our targeting savvy as far as like the volume of accurate options we have of knowing like we're interested in this or interested in that. However, Facebook still has so much data. It's not like all of a sudden you went from having data and then when iOS 14.5 came out, we lost it. Facebook still had all that historical data. Facebook works with an array of third party. There's they also, because there's so much artificial intelligence involved, it's really Facebook's putting together a puzzle that it can only see part of. So like with imaging, like you could ask a computer to be like, give it a section of a picture that has a bridge and ask the computer to model out what the rest of the bridge looks like. And it could do that, analyzing it, going, oh, here's the architecture from this time period of this types of stuff. This is what the bridge might look like. Well, that's kind of one thing Facebook does, is going to be leaning into different forms of technology like that to kind of say, okay, we have this person. Here's what we do know about them. Let's extrapolate out what else we think is likely true about them. So Facebook might not have all the direct data, but there's just generally so much data within the technology that they could probably do a lot of predictive modeling. Go ahead.
So let me ask you something before I forget.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, if I want, like before and after that, the iOS changes, if somebody goes to my website to the motorcycle page, I could, before iOS change, I could put on I call it cookies, you call it pixels, whatever, where that if somebody hit on that line, it drops something, and then you could shoot them automatically, shoot them Facebook ads on motorcycle cases, right?
Yeah.
But now you're telling me to go to my website now that if they're going it on an iPhone, is that right? It's just on iPhones. If they're on a desktop, it ain't gonna matter, right?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
That there's something gonna pop up and say, do you want, do you accept our ability to track you or decline it?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm getting those all the time now. And what I'm seeing is some of them are very straightforward and some of them are tricky as hell. It's almost like they're trying to fool you. I don't know if you're seeing that. But the deal is, if say they decline, then I can't drop that cookie, that pixel. And when they leave, I have no way of knowing, no way of shooting them a Facebook ad on motorcycle cases now.
Yeah. So if someone, well, there's a couple thoughts in that. First off is, yeah, people, there's like Facebook has set it up so you can't modify like the text of the buttons. Like, so that's important. However, they give you a little bit of text you can modify. So people are using language of different language to basically kind of say, like, if we don't have this, we can't help you with certain things. I was on a website the other day. I actually was, now this is with the cookie tracking. I was completely fooled. I felt totally bamboozled when I processed what I just clicked yes to, but they said something about how they can't give me what I need on the website unless I allow the tracking. And all I was doing was reading an article. So I didn't actually need anything else on this website, but somehow in that moment, my brain, despite being a marketer who is savvy with this, I was like, oh, wow, like, why would I not want to say yes, accept this tracking? And so like with, especially like on the websites, when it comes to cookie tracking, they can say anything they want in the United States. Europe has a lot more restrictions on that, but like within the US, you can just say whatever you want. And so I have seen websites that are very sneaky, in which I'm like, that's different. Like there's a certain line of like, oh, we can give you personalized ads or give you whatever personalized content. Like there's a way to say it in a way that sounds persuasive, but knowing what I was, somehow I just, my brain turned off and I accept, and I don't actually really care that they were doing cookies, but I didn't actually intend to say yes to something when I thought I was saying yes to some sort of service. And I was completely like, so you bringing that up, I was just like, wow, if this is happening to me, just imagine people who aren't as savvy and just haven't like heard about these different privacy conversations. They're gonna be like, oh yes, okay, yes, 100%. But you don't have to say yes to be able to use their website most of the time. They just kind of frame it as you have to or else you can't. But on the retargeting aspect, that is correct. So if I am on my iPhone and I go to your website and I've told Apple, ask app not to track. That's typically the language I believe is in there. If I've said don't track me and I go to your website and I leave, you can't retarget me. Now, if I came to you from a Facebook ad, if I clicked on something inside Facebook, maybe even it's just a Facebook page, you're not doing any paid ads, but you put out a post and I click on that, and then I go to your website, within Facebook, you can retarget like Facebook page engagement. So you can still retarget people who are engaging with your materials within the Facebook ecosystem, but once they leave, if they didn't come through something like Instagram or Facebook, but they just go, maybe you send out an email and they go to your website. Well, I'm on your website and you're not able to track me with the Facebook pixel because I told Apple don't let them track. And that would just not even be don't let Ken Hardison track me. I'm saying don't let Chrome track me. And so that's you're correct. We used to be, and you can still do that with some visitors. And I mean, there's a ton of traffic that comes from mobile iPhones, and I would expect generally this to just get more restricted. For now, there's still a lot of retargeting that can be done. And on that note, like one of the changes, like in the past, we did recommend very strongly. I spent a long time telling people like, hey, here's different strategies to use retargeting. And it was kind of a combination of things that, like, let's identify these pages. If people are on your bio page or a free consult page, send them ads that's more focused on a consultation. But if they're just on your blog, send them ads that are a little softer sell. Like we had a whole bunch of stuff we put together about that a few years back. And now that's less possible because if an iOS user has said, don't track me, you will have fewer people in that Facebook can target. So then it's kind of like, now we recommend going more generic, just kind of like you could still send free consult ads or ads have with specific messages, but I would just, depending on the volume of your website traffic, you're going to want to go wider. So unless you're having tens of thousands a month, I would probably just target everybody who's been on your website now.
I had somebody on a webinar last couple of weeks, and they had this, and maybe this means it's not as good anymore, but they give you a list every Monday of everybody that's been on your website from their IP address, and then they would, I guess, pull all this data that you were talking about, people collect, their name, their email address, their physical address, so that you could see everybody that was on your, and tell you what page they were on, and give you a report like once a week. Have you heard that? I don't even know what that's called, but it was kind of spooky, really. But so I mean, I guess you can still do that. I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, that just tells you it's just not hooked up with Facebook where it automatically sends them ads. You got to pull it down and then go figure out what you're going to do, create an audience, all that kind of stuff. It's a lot more work, I guess.
Yeah, there's more work. There's different types of, and there's different kind of ways to track, especially if you want really good tracking. The best way to do this is go to the good old-fashioned marketing funnel, and it's to promote. I mean, I feel like this has been your message the whole time, just is have a free report, send people to a free report. And then once you have somebody doing that, one, if you were to promote, say, a motorcycle accident free report and people click on an ad, well, then you can retarget them just because they were engaging with you. But you also can load that data back into Facebook. And like, so one of the big changes in the past, we would have people signing up for a free report, and you would just be able to tell Facebook, hey, when people hit this thank you page, this URL that's, you know, like kenhardisonlawfirm.com/thank you. And we'd be like, hey, that counts as a lead. Now, because of iOS 14, you can't do that. I mean, it'll track some, but the power of Facebook is when it knows every person who does, because then they're like, oh, well, let's show this, you know, ebook to other people. So now you need to make sure you feed that data back to Facebook. So that's, again, it's another layer of work that and technology to make sure Facebook's getting this feedback. And there's software you can set up, but you got to understand the technical elements of it. And then it's going to be another monthly fee. And so, you know, it's not for a casual user of just like before. It was kind of like, hey, boost a post to get people to the website, do some retargeting. But now it's just kind of getting limited, or it's getting more complicated in some senses. But I know in sometimes the free reports do work. Not every time. I wouldn't do it for like, we haven't figured out how to make it work for car accidents. When we figure that out, I'll have my retirement plan done. But yeah, so there are different kinds of software. Facebook's having to balance this, like Apple's philosophical, let's limit how much data can be tracked. We have, like, you know, you still, and if you are doing that kind of tracking, you got to make sure your website has a privacy policy where people can accept the cookies. And like, you know, even though it's, I mean, it doesn't, there aren't a whole lot of savvy users in the US, and the punishments aren't like they are in the EU. I mean, in the EU, I don't know if I'll ever advertise in Europe because their rules are unbelievably complex. But like, it's just, I would lean away from just generally anything that seems kind of gimmicky and look for something that you're like, this is going to stand the test of data privacy. And you know what will always stand the test? If somebody gives you their data and you feed it back into Facebook to say, hey, this person signed up for my free report or my newsletter or whatever, that's, so long as that person gave you permission, you're never going to run into a wall. So if you use those kinds of strategies to get leads and website inquiries, that's never going to become outdated unless people stop wanting to read ebooks. And I would almost think, like, surely by now people are tired of ebooks, and yet we'll see it works. So it works. And like, that's the kind of thing is, I personally, like, you might be able to get an edge for a little bit using some of these different gimmicks. And if you want to do that, I'm not going to stand in the way of anybody. But if you want something that's going to stand the test of time, I would look for a strategy like that where you collect their data. It's now your data, and you can use that to do email marketing. You can use it for retargeting on every platform. I mean, that should stand the test of time.
You know, I was looking, you was talking about these reports. I was going through some of my stuff. This was from 10 years ago. And this is something I came up with, was 9 critical questions the automobile insurance adjuster does not want you to ask.
Oh, ooh, I like that.
You know, and it's been in the archives, and I need to pull it back out and get it to my PILMA members. I think
I like that.
You know, that's a pretty good title. You got to have something that creates curiosity or secrets or something that they want to. Well, what kind of question don't they want me to ask? I want to ask that question. So hey, you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So you got, you know, I think that could be a good report. But you know, different things attract different people. You know, as we know, it's like fishing. You got to find the right bait, right?
Yeah, that's for sure.
It depends on which lake you're in, or which pond you're in, or which ocean you're in. You know.
Yeah.
But yeah. So what you're telling me is, it makes it a little bit more work. But then again, if you're doing, you can do some other strategies like the lead magnets and everything, like get their email address, then create the Facebook deal, shoot them banner ads, do an email drip campaign. I mean, there's so many other ways. I mean, people shouldn't be throwing that in our arm and say, oh, it's all dead. You know, it's all dead.
It's not all over. It is not like, again, it's not for the casual user. And I don't know if, and one of the things like that this has that we've really started talking more about is just recognizing the fact that Facebook was never built for lawyers. It was built for e-commerce more than anything from an advertising standpoint. So we've always been trying to, fit a square peg into a round hole, or whatever that metaphor is. And we've been able to, there are different ways people have made it work. We've had campaigns work, but it's always not like, you always have to just go a little bit farther, do a little more extra work. And this data reduction it's I mean, again, I think it means like good old fashioned good marketing is where it can be at. I wouldn't go gimmicks, but it also and we've seen some, like, I haven't seen anything major that makes me go like, oh, costs are out of control. And we have some campaigns that do great and some that don't, but that's not new. That's just, I mean, advertising on Facebook has always been just a little more we'll have a mass tort campaign that'll absolutely crush it, hand over fist, month over month. And then we'll have another one that we'll have to update literally every 10 days to try to keep it working. And I haven't seen that change throughout this past several months. And so it's not, I don't think it's doom and gloom. I also think it just means if you want to get the most out of it, there's probably a little bit more education to have, or that's probably what I would say.
Good deal. Well, I think this has been very helpful, and I appreciate you doing it. I mean, we've talked about it before. I think you actually wrote an article in our magazine, the Pilma magazine, about this, about when it first came out, because I asked you to, because I said, this is hot.
Yeah.
And I like when everything's, when people are fumbling around, or Google comes out with a new algorithm, I like for somebody to jump on it, and some expert to get out there and let our members know what's going on. So one other thing is, you're going to be speaking at our summit on September the 29th through October 2nd. What are you going to be talking about, Luke?
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about how to cut through the clutter. And this is one of the things. So we have, as an ad agency, I've been telling everybody, like, listen, great creatives. I mean, you can sometimes get campaigns to work without great creatives, but if you're like, Facebook's about, I mean, it's a social network. So you're competing not really with other lawyers. You're competing with other content, news about a wedding or baby announcements or people's vacations. And so, or definitely the cats, and then politics, and like, there's so much stuff. And so you're trying to compete for people's attention. And so you gotta connect with real humans. And I also will say, like, I had at one point earlier this year, I was thinking about all this iOS stuff and thinking about, AI becoming more and more a part of different sectors, and thinking like, is AI going to take over marketing?
When you say AI,
artificial intelligence. Yeah.
Okay.
When I look at all the artificial intelligence taking over different things, we see it like, oh, it can now do this kind of, like, people have been showing how you can use machines to create SEO ranking websites. And you're like, oh my gosh. However, at the end of the day, you're going to have humans reading, and the complexity of making sure whatever the topic is and writing empathetic is not something that we have. Like, I am not concerned that our creative capacity will ever be overrun by machines. Now, I'm eventually going to die, and maybe the machines one day will, but like, I just like, there's part of the thing is too, for lawyers in particular, you're asking people to call, eventually they're going to call you or maybe somebody on your team or a call center. And there's all of this stuff that happens on intake that Facebook doesn't know. And then there's all of this stuff that happens with the case on the back end. Are they a good client? Or are they paying, you don't want these kinds of clients, or maybe their case wasn't worth much, or maybe it gets dismissed. And that kind of data is not what a Facebook algorithm can see. It's just all invisible. So if you have a machine that writes into Facebook, and then it goes into this 5, 10, 20 month process until it actually knows whether or not what happened, like, what we're doing when we write is we look at stuff and we go, okay, how do we think about like what kind of law firm you are and what kind of clients you like to serve, and how do you help them? And then how do we think about crafting an empathetic message that resonates? And I don't see machines. I'm sure there are people who would disagree with me, but I don't see how machines can do that. And then when you think about taking away some of this data, it used to be the data that made some of this, it helped. And so now you need to make sure your message is clear. People know why, like, who is their ad for them. Like, it's always your person who's a potential client needs to read your ad and go, wait, this is for me. They need to get that experience quickly. And then you need to be clear about what's in it for them and why should they contact you and why should they do whatever you're asking. And so all of these just like marketing principles from before the digital age are all still true. And when you have data reduced, it was kind of like the heyday. We had all this data in Facebook. So what we're talking about is like, how do you craft those messages? How do you think about writing? And this is something that I think we're really good at and very methodical at. It's not just like, oh, I hired some people who are just really good writers. It's no, we have a lot of methods and stuff we've tested out over being in this industry for a decade. And so I'm going to be talking about like, how do you research for this? How do you get in the mindset of who you're writing for? And how do you approach some of the copywriting when you're looking at like how there's different angles to take. And that's part of what is, we never know for sure which ad's going to be great, which message is going to be best. And this doesn't just apply to your ads. It applies to content you write for anytime you're writing, you got to sit down and go like, how do I get their attention? How do I help them care? I mean, I was just writing an email this morning promoting our podcast, and I was sitting there going like, man, I really want people to like, who maybe haven't like tuned into our podcast yet. I want to help them be like, ooh, maybe I want to this time. And so like, it's like sitting there and thinking and asking good questions. So we're going to talk about like questions to ask yourself, different techniques, give some methods for how do you craft messages that can cut through the clutter. Because whether it's a message on Facebook or an email or a pay-per-click ad, or it's a headline on a website page, a lot of the principles are the same. There's some nuance to each platform for sure, but at the end of the day, it's really good communication. And if you want to succeed on something like Facebook, I think it's just becoming more important than ever that you have good creatives. So that's what I'm going to be talking about.
Well, that'll be wonderful, and that fits right into what I hope created that whole event for was practical, proven strategies, not a bunch of theory, not a bunch of fluff. So I appreciate you doing that. That goes in line with what we try to provide when people come to this event. And you've spoken at many of them. I don't know how many in a row. I know you've spoken each year for the last 4 or 5 years. So and you always get good reviews. So we welcome you back, and looking forward to it. So you were talking about this morning about you were thinking about how you can get people to listen to this podcast. So tell our people out there, the lawyers that are listening, tell us about this new podcast, its name, how they can listen to it, what is it about, why should they care? Why should they, yeah. I'm going to ask you that question you probably asked yourself this morning. Why should they want to listen to this podcast?
Yeah. So the podcast is called Lawful Good. It's a show about lawyers and the trials they face inside and outside the courtroom. And so today we just released our 10th episode, and we're doing 20 episodes for season 1. We've conducted 18 of the interviews, and there's a couple things to it. One, and as far as for like where you can find it, if a person's like, ooh, I love podcasts, you can find it on Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, Amazon, and one I'm forgetting off the top of my head at the moment, and Stitcher. That's what it is. And then you can also listen to it just directly on our website, which is lawfulgoodpodcast.com. So we've got all of the things so you can listen to it right there. And this podcast, so I looked out because I've been in this legal space for a long time, and I remember actually, so 10 years ago, it would have been probably about August or September 10 years ago. 9 years ago. Anyways, I was trying to figure out how to create some content for this law firm, and I created 2 videos. They were made in the little software called Prezi. It's I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that's like where like stuff can like zoom in and scroll around. And I did a voiceover recording, and it was kind of just talking about like frivolous lawsuits and people, like, but did you know this or did you know that? And the lawyers who saw it, they ended up sharing it with other lawyers. I ended up speaking at MTMP because I was about to share about what these videos were doing. And it was just kind of this idea of like helping talk about lawyers as a non-lawyer and like all of these amazing things that you do in the world. And also like just really humanizing the lawyers and adding background. So then like fast forward 9 years, here I am on January 1st. I was saying I've thought about starting a podcast for a long time, but I was like, we have great marketing podcasts in the legal space. And that's I mean, that's what we do. We do marketing. And I thought, what? We love creating, we tell stories every day. That's what we do when we do our copywriting or image or videos that we make for our clients. It's telling stories. And it was like, let's tell the stories of lawyers and people who are some of them are well known, some of them aren't. We wanted people to be able to listen and connect to lawyers from like their journey of figuring out like the homes they came from or the different ups and downs. Because I think sometimes you can look out and you can see someone you can see like, wow, Ken Hardis has built and sold multiple law firms. Like I could never be like Ken. And what's I think it's so easy to look out and not see like, well, I mean, every day wasn't sunshine and rainbows. And
No.
and also like Ken's another human. Like, oh man, like I just never thought about Ken in this like way of struggling through different things. I just have seen him, later in his career, and he's like, yeah, I did these things. And I think it's I think it's just a delightful thing to listen to. Like, I think our stories are really cool.
I think they're inspiring. I'll be honest with you. And I will say this. I've been interviewed by a bunch of people, but you have a knack. I open up to you more than I have anybody in 64 years as far as
Wow.
interview. And I don't know what you do. You got some talent. And of course, I guess people know I was on it. And the stuff you got me to talk about, I had never really talked about.
Hmm.
And like, isn't Ben Crump coming out today?
Yep, Ben Crump's episode came out
You
today.
told me it's not going to be a lot about the Floyd case. It's really about all his struggles and trials and how he came up. And I think what it is, it can be very inspiring. I know you've done Mike Papantonio. I don't know who else. Who some of the other ones you've done.
John Morgan, Mark Lanier. Trying to think of some of the other names people recognize. We've done people like Ann Andrews. She does a lot of big bankruptcy cases. We had Sarah Williams. She's does a lot of work with PI in Alabama or Mississippi. Oh boy, I forget now. I'm trying to think, but yeah, I mean, like Mark Lanier's won over $20 billion in verdicts for his clients, and some people might look at that and all you see is a double-digit billion. And but yeah, those are some of the people we've interviewed.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I would tell people to go out there and listen to it. It's a little bit longer, but you can always stop it.
Yeah.
It's just like an Audible book. You don't have to listen to the whole deal. I mean, but I thought it was really well done. I think what you're doing is great, and we here at Pilma and at Grow Your Law Firm, we appreciate you and what you're doing.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Ken.
And people want to get up with you. How's the best way to do that, Luke?
You know what? You can just shoot me. You can go to our website, which is russellmedia.us. But if you want, I love getting emails from people. You can email me at luke@russellmedia.us, luke@russellmedia.us, and we connect. And then, of course, I'll be at the Pilma Summit. We can connect in person there, too.
Great. And don't forget to listen to his podcast. All but me. Don't listen to mine.
No, yours is so great, Ken. I was so proud of how that turned out. Very proud of it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time. And any parting words?
You know what? Just the last thought that when because you said you don't know like about our podcast, to let people know like kind of what makes it special is we spend about 20 hours prepping for every interview. That's part of what it is. And we, our questions are really, really good. And then we do a 2-hour interview session. So we're condensing it down because not all my questions end up being great. But I think that's what makes it special is we're able to grab all these stories, and it's just a unique production. So if you haven't checked it out, check it out. I think it's a pretty cool thing.
And that's Lawful Good.
Yep. Lawful Good. Yep.
All right. All right. Until next time, this is Ken Hardison, dedicated to your success.
You have been listening to the Grow Your Law Firm podcast, the podcast that leads lawyers to more growth, profit, and freedom. Go to growyourlawfirm.com to find more ways to market and manage your law firm. Please leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to your podcasts.